Okay, so shall I speak?
Go ahead,
first?
speak.
The only reason I'm speaking first is because there's two of us and somebody has to. Thank you all for joining us on this. I've called it a webinar. John's called it
a meeting,
a meeting, a conversation. You've been doing a few of these recently.
Yeah.
Is that right, John?
Call them creators dialogues. So dialogues with people that I'm going to sit close to you,
Okay.
because we can bring the screen up and we can.
If anyone watches the Hodge twins.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been up here in Santa Monica now for about 3 weeks and hanging out with John a lot, which is great because I have known John and John has known me for the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Coincidentally. Which
Probably
is about,
at least a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
Different, but
Yeah.
not much.
Which is about 10 years, I think. And we both met on the London Street Hypnosis scene.
Not everybody knows what street hypnosis means.
Yeah.
It's really, sounds really sketchy. Kind of was a little bit.
Yeah. So
you want to expand on what that means?
well, I don't know. I mean, you can if you want.
Okay, well, people know about David Blaine doing magic in the streets. Essentially, James and I got interested from magic, actually, doing magic in like a pub and in the streets in London, to just doing performance entertainment hypnosis with random passerbys. And we were just fascinated with how the use of language can create realities, which kind of lends itself to what we're still doing in a lot of ways.
Right, yeah. And it's an interesting thing because I think listening to John's take, you got into that through magic and performance. Myself, I had a long interest in NLP, how the mind works, how we can use our mind to shape our life. And I got into NLP, and then I got into hypnosis peripherally, and I got into hanging around with the London Street Hypnosis people, which is where I met you, because I wanted an opportunity to experiment and to explore, to find out how this stuff really worked. So that was my kind of laboratory at the time. So I was probably a bit less about performance and that kind of thing than you were.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, somebody wrote a comment on my YouTube channel recently saying, do you know how lucky you are to have been in that place at that time and hung out with those people? And I kind of bristled at that a little bit because the implication was your success is down to having been in this place at this time. But there is some truth in that.
Yeah.
Unquestionably so. There's an idea from Brian Eno. I don't know if people know the music producer Brian Eno. He says something like, there's no such thing as genius, there is only scenius. This idea that there is a scene and people are connected to a scene. And it is important, that connection to a scene, that kicking of ideas around.
But I can say this, connecting to the conversation we're here to have today, I'm going to use your language because I like it, the reality tunnel. The reason I was at the events that I met you at is because of the expression of my reality tunnel. I was intentionally looking to meet people with my interests and being proactive and going out to events to meet people like yourself, to become friends with them. So while it's like, oh, you're so lucky, well, I am, but it's also an expression of my orientation, which comes from the way I make meaning in the world. Right. So it's never one or the other.
It isn't one or the other. And that was in answer to that comment that I got on YouTube was, look, yes, I was in that place, but I did a lot to create that. And aside from that at the time, because I was looking to develop my understanding and expertise in a particular area, I went to the London Street Hypnosis meets. I also ran other practice groups and this kind of thing. I created the scenes. This is not what we're here to talk about, genius versus genius, but I will say anybody who's watching this, who is interested in self-transformation, re-rendering how you engage with life and the results that you get. There's an old quote from Timothy Leary. I would read the whole thing out, but the end line is find the others. Find the others. Find people that you can connect with, that you can kick ideas around, because otherwise, we'll get into what we mean by reality tunnel shortly. The reality tunnel isn't likely to shift if you just hang out in the same language culture all the time. You don't seek other environments. You don't seek sort of nutrition, so to speak, the nutrition of different ways of seeing the world. So I think connecting with other people is really, really important. It's always, I've come out here for the last 4 summers, and a major reason is to catch up with John again and connect and be able to
Because we live in
keep the
different
ideas
reality,
around.
we live in different worlds, and then we kind of cross-pollinate them when we get together in
Yeah,
the language.
yeah.
Let's talk a bit more about why we're here.
Okay.
And then we'll continue. Otherwise, we'll just go on this thread. So one of the reasons we're here is I sent an email to you like a few months back saying I have this idea to just riff with other creators in a context where each of our communities can be present. And that was inspired by listening to an album of a musician that I follow, and there's another musician on it, and I like the album now. I listen to the other musicians' albums as well. And it's like, wow, what a cool way to bring people to our work by not trying to, do it so intentionally or powerfully, like, here, you have to check this out, but let's just be together, just to look at the overlap and the differences. And then if there's something that's interesting to anybody from each other's community, then they can cross over and start checking out each other's stuff as well.
Right.
And a lot of that happens organically with James and I anyway, since we're friends and we've been referencing each other for years. I think we talked enough about who each other is.
There's something I think that is worth saying there, because you said you're having dialogues, conversations with other creators.
Yes.
Now, creator is a term that you use readily. It's a key part of the way you think about things. It's a key part of the way I think about things. In fact, another commonality is about 8 years ago, John and I were in a group called Creation Mastermind.
Oh, yeah.
Which you've forgotten about.
Now I remember.
Now you remember. So the idea of creation, living as a creator, what was called the Power of Eight group, but I got a cease and desist order from
we both got one of those now.
Yeah, we both got cease and desist orders. So my Power of Eight group is no longer called the Power of Eight group. The tagline of that was live as a creative force. So it's a key part of my identity.
Yeah, in mind.
That I'm a creator. It's a key part of John's identity.
Check out my new mug. It says, I am creation creating and being is primary.
Right.
How about that?
Right.
Just first day I have it.
And I think it's worth saying something about this, because I don't know, I mean, there's a fair number of people on this and it's been live streamed as well. Not everyone's going to know what we mean by that.
I know, and that's fair to say, because the word creator could be like, oh, you make art.
Yeah.
And that's like, or you make music. What I actually mean by it is like, that's actually who and what I am. I see myself as the unfolding of the universe and being both like going along for the ride of that and like being swept around by the currents and the winds of the unfolding. And I see myself as an agent in that. My will, my consciousness, every single act, whether I'm aware of it or not, is an act of creation. And so pragmatically what that means is like everything that's happening in my reality is being created by me. This is my reality tunnel. And also then pragmatically, like everything that I want in my life, I can create. I say to my clients all the time, the more you see that you create everything, the more you access your capacity to create anything. And so people say, who do you work with? Well, I work with people who wake up in the morning and they see the world as a blank canvas and they know they can just generate any experience and every literal ontological reality that they want. How to do that and being connected to that consistently, some of the questions around that, there's things to be said about, but the general idea is that. That's what I mean by creator.
Right, right. Which is pretty similar to my view of creator. For me, when I talk about creating, I'm always really talking about co-creating, because, I do believe there is a world out there. I do not believe the world occurs to me as it is, but I do believe there is a world out there that I am engaging with. In fact, that I am I emerge from.
Yeah.
And I create with. So a lot of my work is about creating with what comes up. I call it creating with what comes up. And your state of being, well, is largely created with what comes up through you, what comes into you from the world. And it's how you meet that, how you shape that, how you create with that counts. So I think where we both have commonality is we're both looking at our agency to create our inner experience, but also to create out into the world and make differences in the world as well. So it's an inner creation and an outer creation.
Yeah, and to me, this is the ultimate integration of a lot of work that is considered a spiritual path of creating your disassociation from thought and form so that you can be at peace and have well-being and groundedness, where at the same time, or a lot of other work, we should say, often seen as an alternative, is how you can make shit happen in the world. Right. Make money, change a relationship. And I think both, another place we're similar, is that we're interested in both. We don't see them as conflicting at all, but actually in partnership, you have a way of speaking to both of them, the two different paths.
Yeah, I for a long time, and this is based on somebody's told me this is based on a misunderstanding, but I don't think it is. So I'm not a scholar of anybody's work. I am interested in how other people's work, other people's ideas can inform me in my own creation. I'm looking to see how I can use them, how I can put things together. So there's a distinction that comes from the Western esoteric tradition, a particular teacher in that, which is one of black path and white path. Black path approaches to self-development or magical creation, or white path approaches. And really, in essence, the black path approaches are the path of death, so to speak. And what that means is it means the death of illusion, the death of ego, the death of the constructs that we're mistaking for the world, a kind of waking up to the illusion and a waking up from the illusion. And a lot of traditions, we spent the weekend in Ojai,
Krishnamurti Foundation.
The Krishnamurti Foundation. So Krishnamurti seems to me, we have a lot more familiarity, very black path, right? We wake up from the illusion. We start to see beyond the veil of perception.
Buddhism,
the
three principles,
Byron Katie.
The work of Byron Katie. So there's a lot of stuff that I've loved that is almost all black path, basically.
Right, and to me, it's essential stuff. Even if your interest is white path, which to me, white path, this is the path of life. It's the path where we engage with the world. We look at our humanness, how we create experience, how we shape experience, how we create into the world. For me, white path is about making differences and creating things. It's the path of life because it's the path of creation. In a sense, the black path is the path of destruction. It's the destruction of the illusion. It's destroying reality tunnels, to use a term I think we'll get more into. Whereas the white path is the creation of reality tunnels and the engagement with the world through them.
Yes.
And you see, I think if you look at the word personal development, if you start looking at stuff like Anthony Robbins or a lot of the NLP stuff, a lot of, excuse me, law of attraction, these sorts of things, they're very much white path affirmations. They're white path approaches. They are putting something together and trying to make something happen rather than taking something apart. I'll just say quickly, and I don't want to dominate the conversation.
Don't worry, you will.
This is essential. If you're interested, if you're watching this and your interest is in white path stuff, in making a difference in the world yourself, putting things together, you will be hugely enhanced in your abilities and capabilities by working on the black path stuff profoundly, really first, really up front. And the reason is this: if you're still thinking that your reality tunnels, i.e. the way you're rendering up the world, are the way the world is, if you are too addicted to truth and you think your experience is truth, you're going to have a lot of difficulty doing various white path manipulations. So until you kind of wake up and escape from that truth trap, which is the role of black path work, it's difficult to be highly adept at the white path stuff as well. Is that something you would agree with?
I would agree, but a lot of black path is sold as truth, which is a bit of a trap.
That's the irony of it.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's what needs to happen. If somebody's addicted to the idea of truth and they think the truth is out there, and somebody says, yes, I have the truth is there is no truth.
Yeah, if they would only say that.
Yeah.
The truth is nothing else is the truth except this.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But that's the thing. And there's a conversation about going all in with particular technology versus using a technology. But we'll get somewhere.
So we've very organized. We've taken all your questions from Facebook and email and printed them out and reviewed them and underlined pieces. We have questions from Benjamin DePrez, Brinkmeyer, Anna Reynolds, Kevin Taylor-McHale, Brian Kennedy, Lindsay Kapp, Joanna Beleka, Paul Ahiro, I don't know if I'm Michelangelo Key, Tyrone Crowley, Craig Ambling, and George Guarino. So we'll try to get to as many as possible. And we'll just go back and forth.
The other thing that's worth mentioning is we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah. But we can see you on chat.
Can see you.
So we see some questions coming in on chat. So keep that going, and we'll hopefully get to speak to these as well. So Antonio and Greg, we've got your questions here too.
And please forgive us if we don't get to your question. We can find some way of answering it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure you keep on us.
Let's dive in. And some of them we're going to go quicker than others because we can probably handle them pretty quickly.
Can we say something just to set the frame as well? I'm aware that some frames. I've used the term reality tunnel. John's used a different term. Can I say something about what I mean
You
by
can say
reality
whatever
tunnel?
you want.
All right. Just to set the frame, reality tunnels is a term that I like. It comes from a guy called Timothy Leary that many people will know. You went to see a film about Richard Alpert, Ramdass's partner in crime last night.
It was okay.
It was okay.
It was all right.
So Timothy Leary had this term, reality tunnels. I absolutely love this term as a metaphor. It's not a scientific term. It's a poetic term. And really the idea is we do not live in the world as it is. We live in the world as it occurs to us, as we are making it up with our minds, according to unconscious sets of conceptualizations and rules. So for me, a reality tunnel is a set of conceptualizations and rules about how things are that gets brought to bear upon any given moment and creates the experience of that moment, creates what we see, which overlaps with what you've been talking about, seeing. So what I want to say here is a reality tunnel is actually, it creates a phenomenological experience. It isn't necessarily the experience itself, it's what shapes it. So the key aspects in looking at a reality tunnel for me are, what are the key operational concepts that are under the surface, the conceptual renderings that are shaping perception, belief, choice, all of that stuff in the moment. Now, we kind of get our reality tunnels installed into us to a certain degree as we're growing up. There's a problematic metaphor installed, but we'll keep it simple at the moment. And we end up with this default set, like a repertoire of reality tunnels. They're nested. There's usually one big reality tunnel they sit in. And if you don't know that this is the case, you're going to live in these reality tunnels and think you are living in reality, right? Which means you will only be able to see what you see, and everything else that there is to see you will not be able to see. You'll be limited in your choices. You'll be limited in your engagement. Bless you.
Thank you.
So for me, a big part of my work is using reality tunnels as technology, being able to get into our conceptual underpinnings, transform them so we can transform our experience, transform the way we show up and engage, therefore transform the results that we get.
That's it.
So for me, reality tunnels become a technology when you are no longer just, subject to them. You can hold them as object, you can modify them, you can connect into them, you can disembed from them, you can use them instead of being held by them. You get to use them.
It's exactly the same as where I come from and what I do. It's just that I use that term reality tunnel, or I haven't until now, but maybe I will.
Yeah,
but
I think
the thing that's, what I want to say about it is that if the concept makes sense to you, that's great. But the cool thing about it is the more you actually come to experience the depth at which reality tunnels are creating your experience of reality and how much they're actually guiding your life, the more and more profound it becomes. Because it's like shells. It's like, there's deep, you could say it's deeper and deeper layers, but it's almost like this wider and wider layers. Like it's like it becomes bigger and bigger and more all encompassing. You realize like so many things and everything in your life that you don't even realize where you're being guided. You see that I'm being guided and it's being guided by this reality. Like both of us right now are going through an evolution in our reality tunnels of our business, because for so many years we've done it one way, or slightly different ways, but still similarities. And now we're like seeing that our success and our businesses has also created this really strong tunnel. And then we're like, now we're looking at completely different ways. It's like blowing out the whole system. It's like we're both having like these holy shit moments, right? It's like, fuck, I didn't even realize I was in this tunnel.
Right, because you cannot see what you are seeing the world through.
You can only, and even what you can want, like simply, what do you want? You can't want beyond your reality tunnel. You can't want beyond what you can conceptualize. And so there's, everything changes and expands as you start to see new worlds, realities.
Right, and that's a huge thing. There's an old classic coaching question where people say, what would you do if money wasn't an object? And it's a crazy question, because unless somebody's lived that reality, it's pure speculation, and you end up speculating from inside of the reality that you've already been caught up in.
I'd like to travel. Like to, it's like, you can't even see.
It's like, what are the things I like doing at the moment? But the answer comes from your current reality tunnel. And I'm not knocking that as a coaching question. I think it is anything that starts to push people up and loosen the edges of the reality tunnels, attempt to take them beyond. they might be crude tools. They inevitably are, because bootstrapping yourself out of your current reality tunnels is a challenge, and it's likely to be messy rather than smooth, inelegant rather than elegant. If it was simple, everyone would be doing it all the time. So I'm not knocking that as a coaching question, but just highlighting that when you're caught up in something, it's like, this is how it really is.
Yeah.
This is, you know.
And we are going to get to the questions, but I do want to say about this too, because I've been doing this recently, is challenging my ideas around things that are working well for me. And so like I had the idea, for example, for years that I don't sell my ideas, I just give them away. I take money for the time that I use to serve people. And that's been working for me. But I just got the idea, well, what if this thing that works well for me, what if I just challenge that? Then I started to say, I do want to sell my ideas because, or challenging the reasons why I didn't want to. And it's like, I take something that's working that I feel good about, and then all of a sudden I unsettle it. So it's like, because we usually look for the places where we feel limited. And I would say if we're feeling limited, that's the reality that we already have, is something's not working within that. But if we take the reality that's working for us and we start to question that, that's when we can really shake things up and expand in ways that we, you know, could never even imagine were possible.
That's a really interesting thing. I'm not going to take the bait on that one, because I have something to say on it, and if I do,
we'll never answer any questions. What time is it? Oh boy, let's dive in.
Yeah. Ben
asks, how did you both balance? I'm going to actually shorten this, Ben, so that we can make sense of it. We had to read it like 7 times, but this is like a little shitload of words. How did you both balance your curiosity and exploration with an actual integration of what you were learning? How did you guys balance your exploration and curiosity with integrating what you're learning?
Yeah.
You go first. I'm still trying to understand it.
Okay. So the thing that jumped out for me in that question is what's presupposed by the question. So this is an interesting thing. We're going to get really meta on this one.
We have to.
In the, you know, looking at the reality tunnel that this is coming from, there's this thing about balance. It's like, because this was really confusing for me, because why would I need to balance curiosity and exploration with integration? That kind of almost implies that they're not quite the same thing, and they need to be, should I do more integration, more exploration? That was confusing to me when I read this, because from inside of my own reality tunnel, integration and exploration are not even remotely different. They are utterly entwined. So my way of exploring things, exploring new ways of being, new ways of seeing, is to go into them. So that is instantly an integration happening at the same time. I can't explore a new way of seeing without integration. It's not possible to do.
That's why it was confusing to me too, is because for me, balance is an alternative to integrating.
Right.
So how do I balance integration? My brain was like, I can't see that. Like, so that's why the example I always say is the yin yang looks like this. And it's things folding into each other. I mean, that's a bit of an organic one, but it's things folding into each other with a dot of the opposite end. And it's not 2 half moons. If it was 2 half moons, that would be balance. Integration is about a folding in. And so I experience integration as an alternative. And so for me, my curiosity and exploration, I would say, yes, I could understand your frame of exploration is integration, but I will read that as curiosity and exploration is the reading and the input. And for me, I integrate that with action and doing as a way of actually learning and growing.
Yeah.
So, and we've talked about that before. Like we go through phases sometimes where we're doing more input reading, and then we're doing more being in action in the world. So there's long cycles and small cycles within.
Well, actually, I'm more, when we're doing that input-output conversation, I'm more like about input reading versus output teaching, coaching, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But my exploration is always intimately involved in integration, because if I'm, and there's a distinction from my old coach, Steve Chandler, which probably comes from your coach, Steve Hardison, I don't know, the information versus transformation, which is a way of relating to stuff. Because a lot of people will read a book and they'll read it from the perspective of information. It's like, there's an interesting idea, that's food for thought. You know, there's nothing that triggers me more than coaching somebody and sharing a frame, and they say, well, yeah, it's food for thought. I'm like, no, let's not have food for thought. Let's really digest this, you know.
Well, that's, food for thought means like I'm going to think about it and that's all I'm going to really bother to do with it.
Yeah.
I think this is an important point. There's a reality tunnel that we have that if we don't see it, we might miss the value of it. But the reality tunnel is if we read something, we do something with it.
Right.
Both of us, like we read books, but when we read them again and we're talking about them and we're journaling and doing the exercises of the ideas and bring it through our life, it's very, I mean, because you can read something and just put it on the shelf and forget about it, but then it goes away.
Right. And it's a matter of immersion. So here's a simple formula for you. Time spent with transformative activity is the only way to transform yourself.
What's transformative activity?
Right. Now, for me, this is the question, what's transformative activity?
It's my question.
It's your question.
I just asked, yeah.
If you were to read something in a book, right, and you go, that's interesting. Instead of skipping on, you take that piece, you lodge it somewhere. I actually often write things on educational flashcards. Like I'll write them out because it marks it for me as something that I want to spend more time with. And I'll take that concept and I'll muse on it and I'll go into it. And it's like I go into this, like a method actor will go into a character. I go into the reality of this idea, if this were true fully and completely. Now, I don't need to do this as a formal process because I just do it all the time anyway, because this is part
I don't
of
know
the way.
what makes something formal or not.
Right.
It's like, but yeah.
So here's an idea. John and I were at Ojai over the weekend. We talked about a lot of things. But one of the things that I was thinking about was how much of a resource base that I've built for myself, and there might be different ways of tapping it. On the way back, there were these oil pumps, nodding donkeys,
On the highway, yeah.
and they're just there pumping oil out the ground. And this image stayed with me, and I've revisited the metaphor in a variety of different ways inside of my own immersive experience and psyche as a way of making sense of something within my business. I've really spent time engaging and immersing myself in that single idea.
So what does that look like? Are you sitting down, staring at the wall, thinking about the donkeys? Or are you saying, you know what, I'm going to just go step aside with my journal? Or are you just on the toilet and allowing your mind to wander? Like, are you becoming aware of something and it having some kind of felt sense, Harold mentioned, of the value of it, and then making a decision to hold focus on it? Or is this just happening automatically for you?
I think I used to make a decision to hold focus on it more and more and have more and more formal practice. And I still do formal practice, but I might be staring out the window of the Uber. It's a more polite metaphor I use rather than sitting on the toilet. But you know, it's going to be integrated into my daily affairs. I remember having a discussion with somebody who said to me once, "It's all right for you, James. I am too busy to have time for transformative work." And I'm thinking, well, I'm pretty busy as well. So where do I fit the time in?
This is a reality tunnel. It's like, how do you prioritize? You know, like when we're a kid, if we're sitting there staring out the window and you're in class, what do they say?
Yeah.
Stop daydreaming.
Right.
Right. But it serves a function to sit and think, to sit and conceptualize, to sit and wonder.
Who's got one of these? Right?
Nobody has one of those, right? Yeah.
So these are wonderful devices now that enable us to plug every tiny second of our day with entertainment. You see, so people will drift and they'll pick up the phone. They're like, at that point, your focus is on what's happening in my Instagram feed. Right? Now, if you don't pick up your phone, but instead take that spare 50 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever it would be, reconnecting to some idea that moved you somehow when you first read it or you first encountered it. If you go back there, reconnect with it.
Right.
You know,
it's priceless. This doesn't take that much time.
No.
You know, but just, but it's the iteration. Like if you go back to the nodding donkeys, instead of picking up your phone 3 or 4 times over the week, I mean, that has a massive impact.
Yeah.
Compared to what the phone might have.
Which is another thing about, you know, maybe this thing about balancing insatiable curiosity and exploration with actual integration. So now I'm thinking about this differently. One of the things I have actually learned to do myself is slow down. And what I mean by that is slow down when I'm reading, So I'm a very slow reader personally, because I don't like to move on from a paragraph until I've really made sense of it, really immersed myself in it. But these days, instead of bouncing to another book, to another book, to another book, there are some books that go, I'm rereading this one. I'm going deeper into this one. I want to spend more time with this one. So I think slowing down and not necessarily chasing the next rabbit that pops up.
For sure. I mean, that's shown up in my life a lot, and not just with reading something, but like I have a personal belief, like it says on my mug, that my state of being is primary. And what I mean by that is like what reality I'm in, what I'm experiencing is more important than anything. It doesn't matter what's on my to-do list, going to have a conversation with my wife, whatever. And so if I have work that I'm going to do today, but I'm not in an empowered state of being, I'll just go sit in my backyard, close my eyes and just sit there and be with myself until I'm in a space that has me be empowered and seeing clearly. And for me, that's a version of slowing down. And the reality that I have that gives me the ability to make that choice is that I've decided in my reality that it's more important. It's actually a priority for me to be still and connected to my body. And that value set, which makes up my reality tunnel, is what gives me the ability to make those decisions, to put that first. When you've got the idea that these things have to get done before I can slow down and do transformative work, then you're not going to get to it, because your value set and your reality is that.
Yeah. So do it up front as well. I know for myself, if I'm not clear in my focus and I want to have a constructive and useful day, the most important thing to do is take some time to get clear in my focus.
Yeah.
Whatever it is I want to create.
Even if that takes half the day, for me, it's still more important.
Right.
Because any work that I do from unclear is going to be so much less than what I could do from clear. And I could do more in so much less time when I'm in a powerful state.
Because it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it.
Yeah.
One last thing I just want to say super quickly about this, about exploration and integration. For me, integration, I kind of said this, but I want to create a contrast point. Integration is more about exploration than it is about installation. And I say that for anybody here who may have come up through an NLP pathway or something like this, particularly on the Richard Bandler side of things, where there's a love of the metaphor, and it is a metaphor of installation, of installing a new belief or installing this or installing that. We are organic and we work differently from, sometimes computer metaphors can be useful, but there's a place where they can reach their limits. And I think this one can create a bit of a problem, because people can sometimes think, I'm trying to install this new way of seeing, and if it doesn't install perfectly straight off the bat, installation problem, maybe this isn't going to work. Whereas if you approach it more from an exploration place, it's like, what happens when I render it up like this? What happens when I connect into it this way? How is this different?
I see exploration too as not just exploring information, but exploring in the world with information. And so I always say, get your hands dirty. And so for me, it's like reading something and doing something with it. That's the totality of the exploration.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, that is implicit in what I'm talking about, because if you are living into something psychologically, you cannot help but live from it physically. So once you kind of go into something, you are going to come from that place with your engagements with the world. So one of the things that I want to do when I'm shifting my own reality tunnels, when I'm engaging with the world differently, I actually want to still be able to disembed from that and go meta, so I can check in and say, you know, the old Dr. Phil question, how's that working out for me? What kind of results is that getting me? And this for me is part of my approach, which I sometimes tongue-in-cheek call generative metanoetics. That's a sort of half joke, but everything in it is meaningful. It's the ability to be able to get into a reality tunnel, try it on, notice how it feels from the inside out, live from it for a bit, disembed, look at the results you're getting, make adjustments, reconnect, disconnect, connect into another reality tunnel, cross-pollinate, do all of these things. So I've got a more kind of intricate approach to that, but I'm not going to get into that now.
No, it's all good. I know we're talking about a lot of like kind of heady concepts. I think this next question can help us bring us into something maybe closer to earth. in case that would be useful for anybody. So this is Anna Reynolds. In my experience of using reality tunnels as technology or creating ways of seeing, thanks for mentioning both of our approaches, Anna. I have moments I sincerely fear I am deluded and delusional. John, you've mentioned to me that you call these moments existential thunderstorms. I'd love to hear you say more about that. Assuming you both experience these moments, you may not. How do you respond to that moment and what do you do? So yeah, I have moments where I'm like, whoa, maybe I'm just deluding myself. Maybe I'm delusional. And I call them existential thunderstorms because anytime we're questioning our reality, that's some kind of existential threat. There's a term called existential angst, which is like a stress that a person starts to feel when they reach the edges of their reality and their epistemology. It's like, whoa, what if this is all made up? Maybe you've had the experience of just standing somewhere and then suddenly you feel like, holy shit, I'm a body and I'm alive and everything is, it's just like this moment. I call it an existential thunderclap. Can you relate to that? Where you just have like this, the whole world and everything and how plastic it is just becomes you just become aware of it in a moment.
I have weird trippy experiences.
Yeah.
Not that specific.
Okay, weird trippy experiences. So anyway, there's the weird trippy experience, and then there's like the little bit longer version of it, which is like maybe everything that I'm thinking about myself, like, hey, I'm a coach and I can help people through conversation, and that, you know, and that's worth money and people pay for that, and like I think that I'm a good dad, and it's like maybe I'm just fucking deluding myself, and this whole thing is a fucking sham, and you should only be paid for like laying bricks or like something like more tangible. Right?
Yeah,
and then it's like, fuck.
Right.
And then I remember that I'm right. And what I mean by that is that I remember that I am delusional, and that's okay because we're all delusional and it's all made up, and there's nothing that's like, it's actually this fear goes away when I realized it's true and that's okay. You mentioned the album, the Guns N' Roses album, Use Your Delusion.
Yeah, well, it's
right?
Use Your Illusion.
Oh, Use Your Illusion.
I like Use Your Delusion just as much.
So I think it's weird because in those moments that I have those experiences, it's actually me forgetting that it is how it is. And I think it's because I got caught up in the reality as real and I forgot the black path. Mm-hmm. And I got so lost in the white path of the reality that I've created that I've forgotten that it was a created reality. And then when it got threatened, I got scared, but actually realizing and remembering that it was just made up in the first place is where I find my peace and where I relax in it. Yeah. Can you relate to that experience at all? And do you handle it differently? Or
I can. I think it's for me, it's a clue that I'm caught up in the truth trap, what I call the truth trap. I've used this phrase for years. And I stopped using it for years and I started using it again because I reconnected with an old friend who brought it back to me. So this idea, the truth trap, is simply the idea that there is a truth, that some version of my story is true or can be true, instead of recognizing that no version of my story is ever true, because what I'm trying to describe with my story isn't the story. There's always a gap. Whatever words you use to render up the world is not made of those words. You're just rendering it up with those words and concepts. So there is a sense in which I think Alfred Korzybski used to have a shorthand on this, which is whatever you say it is, you're wrong. Now, if I start to get a sense of like, what if I'm deluding myself? Then I know that I'm buying back into a version of reality that says there is a correct version or a true version. And that used to happen, I think, possibly a lot more, but I think I'm a lot better.
Yeah.
Now. I do get something similar, which I call the sense of unreality, right? This is a thing that happens to me and has happened to me a number of times. And the sense of unreality happens when I experiment with a new way of doing without fully shifting my reality tunnel underneath. It's like I force a new way of doing, and that new way of doing produces results in the world which do not fit my underlying reality tunnel. And I'm like, this isn't real. You know, the classic example I often give is when my business, Hypnosis Without Trance, one of my businesses, first took off. And for the first time in my life, I was being paid whilst I was sleeping for a bit, and paid whilst I was out having a drink in a bar with my friends, and my phone would be going bing, 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 and money would be coming in, and my brain was going, does not compute, you know, because it associated work, hard work, sacrificial work with income. And my brain was saying, no, this isn't real. So I had this kind of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, sure.
And that happens, but that's a slightly different thing.
It's slightly different, but I think it's a cool point too, because talking about magic, which you're certainly doing a lot of work with right now as well, I expand my faith in magic through experimenting with doing beyond my current reality tunnel of what's possible. So like a few weeks ago, a month ago, I was like looking at my income and thinking, some more money could be coming in, that would be useful. And instead of trying to like get down to business and do the work, like the things you're supposed to do out there, I said, I'm going to just focus in on the idea that lots of money is going to come in and new clients are going to be created. And whatever I do throughout the day, fine, I do. And I did that. And then suddenly ding, 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 new clients are showing up. And like within a couple of weeks, 75 grand had like just flowed into the business. And in the past, I've created that kind of money as well, but it's been through more of a, these are the actions I need to take on the outside to produce that result. And it's just every time that I decide that I'm going to go in and create an idea that's powerful and a reality that's powerful, a means of creating, and then that's like a way of doing something where like my habit of doing would be a little bit more of an external orientation. But the more times I orient inwardly, and then that results show up, the more my reality expands to have faith in magic. Like confidence comes through experience. Yeah. You know, I know faith is different than confidence, but I should say my confidence and certainty in magic, creating in non-directly and non-linear way increases. Right. Which is another thing for me. I'm a big fan of creating reference experiences. Right. So I know how our brains work. Our brains often orientate. They'll continue to perpetuate the current reality tunnel because the reference experiences in the past that they created end up being the reference experiences that continue to perpetuate it. So I know I have to hack things. I've got to start to create reference experiences which take me beyond. And part of that's about what you do and the action you take in the world. But a major part of that is how you evaluate your results. Yeah. You know, the choices of the frames you put around your results as well. If you're intentionally shifting your reality tunnel is a huge thing. Well, say more about that. What do you mean by that? What I mean by that is, I'll give the example of magic because it's the easiest thing to do. And I'm using the term here entirely metaphorically and absolutely literally at the same time. I was going to say, wait a minute. Yeah. Because this is the thing. Once you start looking at the nature of reality tunnels, you see that there isn't really any difference between literality and metaphor, anyway. But what I mean by this is if you want to bring a magical flavor, and I think there's a lot of value. I did a video on magic versus science recently, and somebody wrote, "What are you, Harry Potter now, James?" And I get where they're coming from because they're thinking this is crazy. You know, from a tight science reality tunnel, that's a crazy thing. Why would I even want to bring magicality into my experience of myself and the world, right? Well, guess what? The more magicality I bring into the experience of myself and the world, weirdly, the more apparently magical things seem to occur. You know, stuff just kind of flows my way when I would like it to. Things connect up in useful ways. Engineering coincidences seems to become parking spots just appear. Yeah, all sorts of weird stuff. Now, the question is it real? But is it real? That's the wrong question. That's the wrong evaluation of results if you want to continue to perpetuate the magicality. If you ask, but is it real or am I deluding myself? It's just like pop. So your choice in how you evaluate the results you get creates or shapes further reference experiences going forward. So if I interpret results magically, it brings more magicality into the experience, into my reality tunnels. And then if I'm looking from the outside, now, instead of asking, is it real? Is it working? Right. Well, hell yes, it's working. The thing is reality tunnels create a state of being, and they create your behaviors, and they create other people's experience of you, and that actually creates literal, tangible results. I just watched a docu-series on Netflix called The Family. It's about an evangelical Christian secret organization that lots of government high political powered people are members of, and they evangelize for the sake of their religion, but it's also like a power thing. But one of the ideas inside of this brotherhood or this group, fraternity, is that we are chosen by God to lead. And whether it's true or not, I'm not here to say, but what I am here to say is that their belief in that creates a reality tunnel that actually has them show up in the world with a kind of power they wouldn't have if they didn't believe in it. And then it enrolls other people in that as well. And so they're adopting the reality that I am chosen to lead fucking actually creates. It's not like they're just seeing it as themselves are more powerful. No, they are actually accessing more power in the world through that belief.
Right.
And it works at all levels about everything. So as you evaluate magically, it's not like you're just deluding yourself and you're only seeing magic in your life and you're missing out on the other things. You're seeing stuff as magical, but then you are literally generating more results than you would be otherwise. I'm here to say, I would argue to say, because you're evaluating that way.
Right, and that's the thing. So I'm a big fan of the be, do, have thing, which I have been told recently is from a guy called Neil Donald Walsh.
I love how respectfully you reference and let acknowledge people.
I do want to acknowledge people, even though I never read any Neil Donald Walsh. I just picked this up just around and about.
Acknowledge me for it.
I'll acknowledge. Yeah. It's actually my friend Alan Whitten. I don't want to pour the carpet on for you, but our friend Alan Whitten. Maybe Alan's on this somewhere. But this idea of be, do, have, I don't know how Neil Donald Walsh uses it, but for me, the being here stands for how we are creating ourselves and our experience from the inside out, right? Our reality tunnel essentially is the be bit for me. The do is the behavior that emerges from that, and the have is the results that you get. So the way I often see this is how you shape up your experience from the inside out, be, automatically transforms your engagement with the world, do, which in turn alters the results that you're habitually getting, which is the have. So what most people are doing is they're trying to change their actions without going back in and changing the reality tunnel. If you go into the front end, you change the reality tunnel, you get this cascade effect along. Now the thing is, because the reality tunnel's at the front end, if you get to the back end and go, but what's really happening here? Right? Like you're back in the truth trap again. You are no longer being, it's what I call arguing about what is or isn't so, versus taking charge of your meaning making. If we get caught in arguing about what is or isn't so, we cannot start to use our reality tunnels as technology, because the truth trap pulls us away. But when we recognize, hang on a second, I'm taking charge of my meaning making, i.e. the sense I'm making of this, how I'm conceptually rendering this, the choices I make around evaluation. You can still step back, you can still be empirical and ask, how's this working out for me? But that's a different question from, is this really true? And I think that empirical question, how this is working out for me, this is what's led me to bring more magicality into my engagements with the world and my reality tunnels. I see the value of that. If somebody wants to have a scientific argument with me about whether magic is real or not, that's a different question. I'd probably even argue, no, scientifically speaking, magic is not real. But it's irrelevant, and it doesn't serve me to have that, that conversation in terms of actually shaping my engagement.
Let me give a non-magic example of evaluating something in a way that's generative. I had a client recently who was having some concerns, and I was making a compliment to him about something that I saw in him, and he said, "You're schmoozing," and I said, that right there is so important for us to look at, is because if you experience my affirmative declaration to you and about you as schmoozing, then what happens is you create the reality of my efforts to have you feel good as schmoozing, and you devalue it, and you don't access the value of me saying that you're awesome, right? I could tell somebody they're awesome, and they say, oh, he's schmoozing. They actually evaluate that as schmooze, and they miss out on the value of that idea lifting them up. And so I said, and I'm not here to say what you're supposed to do is really get the actual value of, the actual intention of what somebody's saying. What I'm actually saying is do the opposite of schmooze. So if somebody says you're awesome and they mean it, receive it fully and be lifted. And if somebody else is schmoozing you and saying you're awesome, don't hear it as schmooze, even though it is schmooze. Hear it as genuine and let it lift you. So I want to create a reality that there is no schmooze coming at me. There's only genuine praise or genuine seeing of who I am. Right. And if it's something that's not advantageous for me, like you're an asshole, I'll see that as not real. Yeah. And I'll just ignore that. And now there's a fine line in this too, because you could disassociate from the world, not be grounded, not be able to receive criticism. And so it's a dance. It's not about being completely disconnected from the planet and walking out into traffic and getting run over, but it's about having a perceptive position where you can choose what you're going to let in based on how it makes you feel and how it helps you to be more effective, and what you're going to leave out and not take on.
Right. And this is a perfect example of this distinction, which I often use, which is arguing about what is or isn't so versus taking charge of your meaning making. So when John delivers that to his client and his client says, "You're schmoozing," the client's gone into arguing about what is or isn't so.
Right.
Right. There's no power in that. There's just no power in that. There isn't. There's no leverage. There's nothing you can do in terms of self-transformation, or very little. I'm not going to say there's no leverage. But instead, what John's doing is John's trying to help his client here take charge of his meaning making, recreate his perceptions of himself. Now, if somebody always goes, "Yeah, but," they're back into arguing about what is or isn't so. So one of the reasons why often with some clients I will make this explicit is because the name of the game in our coaching sessions is taking charge of our meaning making to create transformation. So I want to call out arguing about what is or isn't so, because it's fundamentally dysfunctional.
So much more important than anything else.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, and this is a huge thing. A lot of what I'm doing is I'm hooking people from that truth trap so they can start to create with their meaning making, their conceptual rendering. One last tiny point.
This is going to be like a 5-hour conversation. We've gotten 2 questions in, so buckle up.
I just want to look at that term delusional quickly that's in the question. Right? What's the difference between delusion and illusion? Now, if we accept that we do not live in the world as it is, only as we are rendering it up to be conceptually through our reality tunnels, everything is illusion. And the only question for me is whether it's functional illusion or dysfunctional illusion. So for me, delusion doesn't mean it's not true. It means it's dysfunctional. Delusion, dysfunctional illusion, right? So you can check by stepping back, taking a meta perspective on it, you know, reevaluating all the different points of your life and asking the question, is this taking me closer to how I want to be, what I want to have, or further away? Is it moving me into a more empowered experience of myself as an agent in the world, as a creator in the world, or taking me further away? Or, as I sometimes like to render it down to utterly most simplistic terms, better or worse, right? Is this rendering of reality serving me, or is it undermining me? Now, I know that's not necessarily a simple question. There's a lot of tools for evaluation, a lot of it felt sense evaluation, this kind of thing. But ultimately, the difference between illusion and delusion, for me, is the degree to which that rendering of reality is serving.
Nice. I never heard that before. I like it.
Right.
All right. Kevin Taylor-McHale's question. Was there a specific turning point for you where you felt that you really started to be able to pull back the veil of your own perceived experience of the world and take a peek behind the curtain? That is, was there a specific point in time or a certain set of circumstances in which you felt that you'd begun to spot your own and others' reality tunnels more clearly? And if so, how did that feel to you? Or is it an ongoing unfolding of deeper set of understandings, or neither or both, of course? So we talked about this a bit before. Yeah. Do you have something you want to say before I dive in? Or?
The only thing I want to say about this is I could pick transformational moments in my life. I could pick moments. In fact, I did a webinar series a number of years ago called Stories of Self-Change. And all I did in that was I told stories about moments where I had big mind shifts and these sorts of things that had really made a difference in my life. I could have taken any one of those and created it up as, you know, a sort of origin myth for myself, and said this was the moment where everything changed, and that would have been a story, you know.
Yes.
And it might have been a very valuable
That's
story.
what I'm saying. It might have been a reality tunnel.
Yeah, it might have been a very valuable story.
Can I jump in right there?
Yeah, please do.
So this is, so I think the question's a great one. I think, you know, and I agree with James. I could pick points in my life that were turning points where all of a sudden I could see the matrix more, like my years of traveling the world and seeing all the world's religions different and people being so devout to them. It's like there's these moments, right? I could pick one of them and make that the thing. And maybe I will someday. I haven't yet. And yes, of course, it's a constant evolution. But here's where I think what I want to go even beneath this question is from relating to it for myself. What I have seen is my own curiosity as to whether or not a person has had a moment has, for me, suggests that there's something in my reality that believes there is a moment. And if that's the case, then I'm looking for my moment in the future. And if I'm looking for my moment in the future, that which suddenly then I'll be able to see things I can't see, then I'm actually abdicating my responsibility to see more right now. And I'm looking for something out there or other than here in order to access more of what I already know is possible. And and so for a lot of the Black Path stuff that we're interested in, I've just started to see the theme. I've done a lot of studying of Joseph Campbell's work in mythology. And so I see the myth in everything that's delivered today, not just the older myths. When you see the work of Byron Katie and there's the moment with the cockroach crawling across her foot where suddenly she can see. There's Eckhart Tolle sitting on the bench and suddenly he can see. There's Krishnamurti sitting under his pepper tree and then suddenly he can see. There's Sid Banks having his moment and suddenly he can see. And so the story, it's like there's a carrot on the stick in the Black Path teachings, which is like, if you just listen, there will be a moment for you of transformation. And while I think both things are true, I think there can be moments that are transformative and suddenly you see a new way. But if you are seeing reality such that I'm not able to see in a new way until I have my moment under my tree or with the cockroach or on the bench, then what you do is you set up a conflict for yourself that my capacity to see with more breadth, with more depth, is on the other side of an experience that I'm waiting for. And I think when you do that, you actually distance the capacity of seeing. And I think what's actually the case is these moments arise because we're embracing the idea that we can see greater than the moment and we can see these other realities, and bit by bit things start to emerge. There's no doubt that like by spending time with the concepts of non-duality, with the concepts like the three principles that you have, that there's a kind of cascade of the mind where all of a sudden reality starts to bend and morph and you're like, whoa, like having a hallucinogenic experience or something, a psychedelic experience where you're like, all of a sudden you can see it. So I'm not saying these things to discount those realities, those what you could call stories, because I actually think that the moment you have an experience like that, if you apply a story to it and you give it meaning, that can actually help to keep it alive and to keep it present in you. You know, I think anybody that's had an experience of being maybe on a spiritual retreat or spending time in conversation or reading about some of the three principles, and your mind starts to expand, you start to feel free, you probably have had the experience, if you don't stay immersed in that, of there being a kind of half-life to it and it's starting to decay. But if you create a story and a reality that supports that experience, that you can carry through time, then the new conceptualization actually keeps that way of seeing and being alive. Right. Even if that way of seeing and being is the idea that seeing is an illusion, which is a kind of a Black Path. Yeah. And I would say that even Black Path, even the experience of non-duality is its own reality tunnel, but that's another story.
Right. And I want to point out something about what John is doing, talking about here. I want to go a bit meta to what you're doing and talking about. There's a frame that I really like that I sort of moved away from a long time and then came back to it recently, which is the idea of technology. Okay, and technology is anything that you can use that kind of gets these results that go, you know, way beyond perhaps a simple thing. We think of technology as things like iPads and the internet and stuff like that, but writing was technology. Religion was technology. You know, all sorts of things in the past that we don't think of as technology. Technology. And really, something becomes technology when we use it, okay? So what John is talking about here is using something. People might assume that, like, well, I have an experience or I don't. John's talking about how you can use your meaning-making capacities to breathe more life and to blow on an ember and have it burst into a flame. You know, instead of being passive to it, like it's an event that just kind of happens. So if we're passive to something, it's not technology for us. Okay, anything we're passive to is not really technology for us because we're not using it. If we think of the events of our lives as things we're passive to, we don't get to use them. If we see we have choices in what we do with them, how we relate to them, how we render them up, we can start to use the experiences of our lives and our manipulations of them in a technological way, as technology, to starting to get more useful results.
More juice out of anything.
Right. And this is the place John is automatically going to, is again, not, is it true, is it not? Was it this experience, was it not this experience? But how do I render up this experience conceptually in the way that serves me most right now in terms of what it is I want to do? That for me is using what we have, our epistemology as technology, our phenomenology as technology, you know.
So I see these black path teachers or spiritual teachers that have these transformative moment stories as indulging in a loving act of white path creation when they have a story about that transformative moment that supports their experience and helps others to see something that they can move towards. So I'm not here to say that it's delusional. I think it's an illusion, to use your distinction, because it's functional. So Kevin, I would say instead of looking for whether or not they will happen, if I were you, I would look for how can I create them through how I make meaning.
Yeah. And also do not discount small incremental change.
Oh,
okay.
Of course,
you know, on the flip side of all of that, I think we're both big fans of the both end.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I want to do when I'm working with clients doing change work, which I do a lot less of these days, is I want to tune them in for looking for small differences. And I want to create a story around those small differences, creating big differences. You know, so even if we get a big shift in the session, I don't tell them, this is your moment. This is your transformative moment. I don't create a big myth in that moment. Like everything has changed now. I'll say, wow, and all of this, and whereabouts in your life when you're experiencing all of this now, whereabouts in your life going forward could even a little bit of this make a really big difference? So I do this thing where I get a big experience with the client, take a little bit of it, but imply a little bit could make a big difference. So I'm constantly mixing and folding big and small in and out to create a gradation which can have any small experience become profoundly transformative, but not have to hold on to big experiences in a rigid, inflexible way as well. Because I'm aware that we are organic, we learn. Sometimes transformation, well, it's always a process. Even if you get big shifts, it still sits within a, you know, a process, an unfolding narrative across time, unfolding across time. So I want to keep those elements in there as well.
Great. Let's go on to Brian's question.
Yeah.
Brian asks, what are the most important steps to take for buy-in? Then he goes on to say, when doing any type of hypnosis or change work phenomena. So I'm just going to lop off that last part because I think the important part of the question is what are the most important steps to take for buy-in?
Yeah. And buy-in here, I know a little, I can guess a little bit of where Brian's coming from because I've had some dialogues with Brian as well. Brian's interested specifically in hypnosis and change work and phenomena work. But in hypnotic phenomena work, if you take a classic piece of hypnotic phenomena, like it's one thing I've done 1,000,001 times, helping somebody experience or taking somebody into an experience of their hand stuck to the table. What you have done in that moment is shaped their reality. You have engaged their meaning-making faculties, their reality-shaping faculties. You've led them in a particular way to having a particular experience.
For me, somebody saying yes and paying for coaching is a hypnotic phenomenon.
Right,
too.
Exactly.
So like, to me, that's why I said it doesn't matter what we're saying. What's the most important steps to take for buy-in for from another person?
Yeah. So buy-in
for anything.
To step perhaps out of the reality tunnel they were in and into a new one that you're rendering up for them.
Yes. So what do you want to say?
So most important steps for buy-in, I would say, this is nothing revolutionary. It's old school, but go there first, right? And what I mean by that is come from the reality tunnel that you want somebody to buy into. This is the most powerful thing you can do. If you're coming from a different reality tunnel, from the one that you're trying to sell somebody into, you are incongruent.
Yeah.
You are being duplicitous. So
yeah, the simple way that I would say the same thing is if I want somebody to buy into something, then I need to buy into it.
Right.
If I have bought into it completely and I just show up, other people will buy in too.
Yes.
And I think that if anybody is asking the question, how do I get somebody to buy into something, then they haven't bought into it yet. If you've completely bought into something, that question doesn't come up.
Yeah, and this is for me the difference between what I call gravitational influence versus strategic influence. So a lot of the time when people learn stuff, particularly from the world of NLP or conversational hypnosis, I'm not knocking this stuff. I love this stuff, by the way. I love strategic influence. I really do. But it's half of a yin-yang in many ways. I think if you're going to study strategic influence, learn from it. Don't try and apply it in the moment. Strategic influence is manipulating people in order for them to perceive something a certain way, okay? Gravitational influence is when you just drop into that reality so fully and completely that it's like the sun, okay? The sun doesn't strategically manipulate the planets into orbiting around it. The planets orbit around the sun because of the nature of the sun, right? Because of how it is being. It's just a fundamental part of its nature and its truth.
One of the ways that I create gravity, though, is to use strategic influence inwardly.
Right, yeah, exactly. So that's the more powerful thing, and it's the be, do, have thing instead of strategic influence.
Do, be, do, have.
Right, do, be,
do
have.
In, to be, to do out, to have.
Yeah, because you want to transform the inner core first.
Right.
You want to come from the inside out, and you want to come from that place fully and completely. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't do. You know, this is one of the things, I mean, because of the background I'm in, people sometimes talk about covert hypnosis, and I'm thinking, covert, you're hiding something, right? You don't want to hide something, you want to get into the truth,
be it.
You know, live it fully from the inside out. And then everything that you do, everything that you say will automatically align with that. So be in the reality. When I'm teaching hypnosis, and I know we won't talk about this, one of the things that I often ask people is to say, what is your philosophy of hypnosis? And I will say most people will look at me blankly because they haven't got one, because they haven't really thought it through.
It's like the black magic Jerry, the guy Jerry at the hunt over the weekend.
Right, but he was all in, you know.
I know, all in. You know that hypnosis is black magic, and you said, what did you say to him? You said, "What's black magic?"
Yeah, I said, "What's black magic?"
And his eye, he didn't have an answer.
Well, he said that it was obvious what black magic was.
But, it's obvious.
Yeah, but what I'm saying here is, like, if you're a hypnotist or if you're anything, right? Yeah. And let's take hypnosis as an illustration. Because somebody might have discovered about hypnosis, then they learn it, they go to a hypnosis teacher, they learn some things about what it is and what it isn't. But it's still this kind of thing over here. It's not really their reality tunnel, right? They don't know how to live in it and from it in the same way. So I encourage people to get really into it and go, what is it to me? What does it mean? Why is it important? Why from the inside out? When you rigorously create this within yourself, it says connection is unstable, it's good now. When you rigorously create this from within yourself, you will just automatically come from it. Everything is aligned with it, because everything is still touching, every word, every gesture is still touching the reality tunnel that you're coming from. So that's one key. Yeah. The other key I would have on this is never, ever, ever try and convince is or isn't so versus taking charge of meaning making. This is key for buy-in as well. As soon as you get into the realm of arguing about what is or isn't so with anybody, you're trying to justify a reality tunnel, right? And if you truly believed it, you wouldn't be trying to justify it. So if I believe the sun is going to rise tomorrow morning and somebody says to me, James, it's not, I'm unlikely to get into an argument trying to convince them that it is.
So just wait.
Right? I'd be like, really? Okay, whatever. Do you see what I mean? Like the fact that I'd be trying to convince someone the sun is going to rise in the morning is actually more of a reflection of my doubts.
Yes. That's what I was saying about the buy-in.
Right.
If you're asking how do I get somebody to buy in, it only can come from I haven't bought in.
Yeah.
Completely.
Right. And certainly, I said I wouldn't give the example of hypnosis, but many hypnotists try and convince people or clients or whatever that hypnosis is real. I was going to do a video a while back going, are you willing to burn hypnosis? Like, are you willing to let go? It doesn't matter, right? You don't have to convince somebody that something is real if you believe in your heart that it's real. It's irrelevant. Convincing becomes irrelevant. You just do or you do not do. That's the choice, as Yoda would have put it.
which, you know, that, I mean, so that actually is a really, let me talk about that though. I just talked about this in creating class last week. Because we're talking about, you need to buy into something in order to have others buy into it. And are you willing to burn hypnosis? Means, are you willing to give up the idea that it's real?
Yeah.
And at the same time, buying into it as being real is what has another person buy into it and show up with it. So you need to be able to destroy it to create it.
Black path, white path.
It is black path, white path. One of the things I talked about in creating class is one of the obstacles for a person believing in something is the idea, the reality tunnel, that in order to believe in something, I need to have proof, I need to have evidence, I need to have logical, rational proof that it is real in order to speak it.
Yeah.
You know through evidence or proof that it's real. And so then your capacity to believe in something and make it real is hindered.
Yeah.
And so you want to destroy it, but then you also want to hold both that it's not real and it is real at the same time.
Right.
And that sounds impossible.
Right.
But the reality is, or my reality tunnel is that it is possible to both know something isn't real and to real. And so in a way, the ability to buy into something completely emerges from that being able to hold that duality of reality.
Yeah. And I don't know to what degree I hold it, but I know that I value flexibility and maneuverability. So,
sure.
So for me, there's the old Greek verbs to know, gnosis and ideum.
Mm-hmm.
So gnosis is a personal knowledge, right? So if I know London, it's because I've been there, I've lived there, I've saturated myself. If I've read the Wikipedia page about London, right, that's ideum. If I've lived in London, that's gnosis. So it's a kind of embodied knowledge. And for me, the difference is a phenomenological one. Now, you've also got this idea of agnosis, which is disbelief, the ability to disbelieve. So I like to play with agnosis and gnosis, right, as technology. I want to be able to go into something gnostically, know it from the inside out, have it come alive phenomenologically from me. But I also want to retain the ability to step back from it and be entirely agnostic about it and say, that's not real. That's just made up crap, right? I want the ability to be able to do both. And I think you need the ability to do both to really use a reality tunnel as technology. Otherwise, you're just had by it or you're not had by it. And sometimes you've got to be had by it. If you're going to get someone to buy into a reality tunnel, you've got to be being had by it in that moment. If you're not being had by it in that moment, there's a disconnect. But sometimes there's a downside to being had by it. There are no correct reality tunnels. So they're contextually functional or dysfunctional. So that maneuverability, to me, is a key part of the craft.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to skip Lindsay's question because it's about balance. Maybe we'll come back to it at the end, but we talked a lot about balance and integration.
Okay.
So, Lindsay, if you want to re-articulate your question in the chat for us, that
there's a million questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, maybe. But let us know if it still doesn't feel answered, and then we can come back to it at some point, if not today. In Joanna's question, she says, how do you shift your mood being an orientation to the world, not a temporary emotional state? So maybe she means like reality tunnel or state of being, into one where the notion of creating is an accessible possibility.
So there's a couple of directions my brain's going in. I noticed, I'm going to just cross-pollinate this with a question from Antonio.
Cool.
Antonio asked in the side chat, I just glimpsed it as it came up, whether when I talk about reality tunnel, whether I'm talking about the same thing as when I talk about trance. Okay. Now, when I'm teaching hypnosis, I talk about trance, and I say every state of mind, every state of being in any given moment is one kind of a trance or another. For me, a reality tunnel more points to what underpins a trance or an experience, whereas the trance side of it is more the feel of it, how you experience it in the moment. So they're interrelated. Now, the reason I cross-pollinate this here is because Joanna has asked about mood, okay? Now, mood, state, all of these things are about our sort of phenomenological experience and the behaviors that emerge from them. And this is exactly what I mean by a trance, by the way, when I'm talking about trance. Phenomenological experience, i.e. an experiential experience and that which emerges from them. And it seems to me here that how do you shift that? How do you move that? And it can be challenging sometimes to do that. In NLP, they often talk a lot about state control. And that's a great idea. And there's various tools and techniques, often many of which are useful. But control is a strong term. I personally have not mastered state control, and I have not mastered control of my moods, control of my trances. Hell, I don't think I've mastered control of anything. But I have got rather better influencing shifts. And for me, I normally have to do that a little bit indirectly. So one of the things that I like to contrast is attitude versus state, or attitude versus mood. Sometimes it can be quite challenging to shift a mood directly, but you can shift an attitude, i.e. how you meet that, right? Another key part of my work is creating with what comes up. So if I'm creating with what comes up, or creating with what comes at me from the world, if a mood is what's coming up for me, instead of me trying to shift that mood, change that mood, resist that mood, push that mood away, struggle with that mood, because I've decided the mood is bad and it has to be got rid of, that tends not to work well for me. So my choice instead is in how I meet the mood and how I create with the mood. So here I'm going to go, I treat mood as circumstances. If I can't immediately change it, it's just part of the circumstances.
The mood you're feeling is like akin to whatever's happening out there.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, that's coming at me from there.
There's a truck coming, there's a truck in here.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do I meet that? How do I create with that? How do I dance?
Is there a general way that you do?
Yeah, there's one way that I often do is I will notice, first of all, for a start, if I've decided it's bad and not useful, I know I'm already resisting it.
Yes.
Number one.
Yeah.
Which means I'm already framing it. I've already I'm already in the realm of what is or isn't so. This is bad. This is stopping me being at my best. And I do need to be at my best. So if I'm in a bad mood and I've got to show up and be at my best, I've got to be at my best. That's not true. You know, who says? Who says I have to be at this mythical thing called be at my best?
Right.
You know, what if it was okay to turn up being less than my best? So I go from arguing about what is or isn't so to taking charge of my meaning making. So I might say, I'll give a specific example I've given several times. I had a group coaching call a little while back that I was not in a good state for because of some things that have been going on. Wasn't in the best headspace for it. It wasn't the headspace I'd have chosen to be in. So ahead of time, I was like, I've got to get myself in state, right? So I'm arguing with it. I'm struggling against it. But I recognized the folly of this. So instead, I thought, what does this mean? So instead of arguing about what is or isn't so, this is bad, I go to taking charge of my meaning making. What does this mean? I get to choose the meaning, right? Now I'm meeting the state by choosing the meaning. So I say, well, this is a pretty human thing. Yeah, this is a pretty human thing.
To have a mood.
So in what way might it be useful to turn up profoundly human on this call? Right? So this is me creating with the mood. I choose the interpretation. It means I'm human. It's a human experience. And where could be being profoundly human serve me?
So to me, inside that is black path, white path. In that same, it's like, so the way that I would say that I meet a mood that is not feeling functional, seeming functional, is to be, my orientation is moodlessness instead of a different mood first. And so, and the part where you're saying like, this is being human. There's kind of, to me, that's a surrender. That's an acceptance. That's a loving what is. That's observing what's actually happening without trying to change it at all. And I think that once you start to become adept at doing that, and you can quickly detach from the experience, you can then snap right into white path, what would be a more useful mood really quickly. But I think it's useful to point out that, for me, it's useful to remember that until I've actually really have an embodied gnosis of, wow, this is just me being human. And it's okay that I've got this mood. until this is actually not just an idea that I've spoken, but something I actually mean it and I feel it, then I'm no longer subject to the mood, I'm observing it. And from that position, that's when I can do the second sentence of what you're saying. I've been articulating this recently with a biblical phrase because I feel how it moves me. And that phrase is, be still and know that I am God. So I've lopped God off and I've just kept the be still and know that I am. And so for me, the be still is, oh, this is being human, right? When I'm still, when I'm silent, I'm be still. It's like, okay, I can just observe this mood. I'm not in the mood. I'm not, it's just this thing that's happening. And I can see that in that stillness. That's the black path moment. And now that I'm still and I'm disembedded and I'm having the mood, but the mood's not having me. I'm just being with it. It's just there. It's a thing. It's okay. And know that I am. And then whatever, I put a statement at that. I am in a great position to be coaching my clients today. I am ready for this call and feeling good and open and loving and committed, whatever the words that I want to do that evoke that in me. Right.
Can I point something out? Again, I want to point out, because there's something to be seen here in John's description, so far as I'm concerned, that a lot of people do not see. There are people I know who are hugely transformative. They have an ability to engage transformatively with themselves and the world and create change in themselves. John is one of these people. So, be still and know that I am. It's a bunch of words, right? It's just some words. Except it's not. Did you see how much John was going into, bathing in it, saturating himself in the meaning? Each one of those words is a kind of, to use a hypnosis metaphor, each one is a trance induction.
Absolutely.
Put together, they're a particular trance induction. Some people talk about self-hypnosis. It's self-evocation, right? John is using technology here. He's not just trying to convince himself of a different way of thinking through some cheap affirmation. He's getting into it. He's connecting deeply into the meaning, the resonance, the everything. He's allowing these words and how he connects with them to transform him in that moment. That's craft. What you're seeing, what you're witnessing there is craft, okay?
Thanks, James.
You're more than welcome. And I cannot emphasize this enough, because people are often asking me, James, but how do I do this? How do I do that? And they're just skimming across the surface like a stone. Instead of going, how do I get into this so that it comes alive, even in this moment, that I resonate fully with it? And this is something that everybody I know who is really profoundly effective at the craft of self-transformation and working with their reality tunnels, this is a key part of the craft. Is really bathing in it.
So let's go to George's question, because this is connected to this. He says, off this point, can you give us some hacks about living the reality tunnel of magic? How does one stay focused on what it is they want to create? So for me, this is a hack. Like, I have a whole program on how to use affirming and speaking as a way that creates, and the essence of it is like, how do you actually bring to life language? On the door in my office here, it says abracadabra, I create as I speak. And for me, like, speaking is magic, but as you're pointing out, the way that I'm using my words is not like blah, 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 blah. I'm using them only as like as a guide into a way of being and a way of experiencing. And so for me, when I say be still, it's not like, oh, I said it. It's like, I'm actually giving myself a command. I'm saying be still so I don't move. And then it's like, okay, I'm even gonna like hold my breath for a second maybe, or like be really calm with my breathing. And I'm gonna actually let all the cells that are moving through my body just slow down for a second and be still. I'm gonna still my mind. And so it's like, I'm actually doing the words, and I'm trying to take what they mean and evoke them in every possible way of seeing them and have it actually happen right now. And then it's and when I speak the word and, it's like, I'm invoking or evoking the idea that two things can exist simultaneously, and I'm feeling my reference experience of that. I can both love my wife and be mad at her. It's like, oh, and is a real thing. And no. And so for me to know, I'm invoking gnosis. It's like, what do I mean by no? I'm declaring no to myself, to know something. It's not just like, oh, pay attention. It's like, no, fuck. I'm about to say something, and I want myself to fucking see it, hear it, feel it, my whole sensory experience, my whole body, know that I am. That's an evocation of identity. So it's like, I am happy. It's like, no, I am the happiest guy I know. It's like, I am that. So for me, a hack to living the reality tunnel of magic is slowing down and letting, and casting spells with your words. I use that video, that clip, talking about Harry Potter, where they're learning how to cast a spell, and Hermione can make the feather levitate, but nobody else can. And it's not just how you wave the wand and say the words, it's actually believing it and actually going into it. And you wrote down a phrase.
I wrote down the phrase that John said is, how do you bring it to life? That's it. That's a key phrase. Bring it to life. This is true. Some of the people watching this might be practitioners of hypnosis. As a practitioner of hypnosis, when you are speaking words, bring them to life, embody them, have them come alive within you. When you are shifting your own reality, bring it to life. This is where, again, taking charge of your meaning making rather than arguing about what is or isn't so is important, because you could be there. Way a lot of people do affirmations, it's like, I'm a wonderful and caring, loving human being. I'm a wonderful and caring, loving human being. And
I'm very relaxed.
They're arguing about what is or isn't so. Their brain inside is going, yeah, but are you really? Are you really? Is that really true? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
Now, this is not about truth. Hence the purpose of my science versus religion, science versus magic video is like, what we're doing here is magic, if you want to put that frame around it. It's not science. It's not about truth, all right? It just isn't that. It's about how you bring to life. Now, if we live our lives based upon reference experiences, what most people don't know is you can create reference experiences. This is the thing. John is, he says these words to himself, creates, evokes an experience within him, invokes, evokes. And it starts to create reference systems for his reference experiences for his neurology going forward. This is a huge, huge part of this work, I think. And also, this is one of the problems. I'm not going to knock NLP here. I love NLP. The problem with turning things into processes. Like, for example, look at a classic. If people are familiar with the classic 6-step reframe, there's a sort of instruction in that that says, thank the part for da 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 da. It's like, what are you doing at that point? The question is, what do you want to bring to life? What you want to bring to life is genuine understanding, genuine appreciation, genuine gratitude. You want them to come alive.
What does that mean to bring to life specifically? I have an opinion. I think it means you're speaking it, you're hearing the concept, you're seeing it in your mind, and you're feeling it in your body.
Right, absolutely.
Your entire sensory experience is activated, and that's relevant neurologically, because the reality is protein synthesis only occurs when there's emotional chemicals released in your body. So if you want to generate new synaptic connections associated with that concept and actually update the reality tunnel on an embodied way, then you need to have a full emotional experience for the words. Otherwise, it just kind of comes and it goes and it's forgotten.
Right. Now, some people might ask, and I know because I've been doing this kind of stuff long enough that I know people ask this, so how do you do that? Right? So there's that, how do you do that? In this instance, how do you stop yourself from doing it is far more relevant. Because all kids have a wonderful capacity to go fully into experiences in a fully embodied way. Nobody doesn't know how to do this, but at some point,
we atrophy though.
Right. We teach ourselves not to do it. And one of the ways we teach ourselves not to do it is by falling for the idea that truth is paramount, right? That I mustn't delude myself. I mustn't live in illusion. I have to be realistic. So we get so conditioned towards this realistic, non-illusion engagement, which is a fantasy, that we start to go, we cut in with, yeah, maybe this isn't so. Maybe I'm tricking myself. You're a performer, right?
Okay.
You have performed as a magician.
Yes.
I too am a performer of sorts. I think there's a lot to be learned from the world of performance arts, acting, this kind of thing, Stanislavski method, learning to really immerse yourself fully. I don't know if anybody's seen the Jim Carrey, the film about Jim Carrey, the Man on the Moon film?
I don't know if I've seen that.
Okay, I haven't seen it either. But
let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. We've not seen it. We're going to talk about it. A lot of people have told me about this film, and I keep meaning to watch it for this reason. It's about Jim Carrey fully becoming Andy Kaufman and how it changed his life. So a lot of people have noticed that Jim Carrey has kind of changed recently. All right, he's not the Jim Carrey of old. He seems like a lot deeper. That's because he had a profound experience of becoming somebody else for an extended period of time, going fully in. Now, somebody might say, well, Jim, how did you do that? Jim's probably going to say, well, I just did it. I immersed myself, right?
Yeah.
He didn't keep himself out. One of the
That's
things
the key thing. It's through stopping the things that are stopping you from going all in.
Right, because he could have easily said, well, I'm not actually Andy Kaufman.
Right.
I'm not really Andy Kaufman. I mean, Andy Kaufman's a different guy. That's not really me and who I am. But that would have been, that's arguing about what is or isn't so, right? That's the science paradigm. That's all about, well, what's the truth, right? We're not talking about the truth here. We're talking about craft, okay? It's not about truth. It's about creating, exactly.
To me, that's like, philosophically, for me, like my philosophy is, and there was a point in time where I realized that my seeking of truth was becoming in conflict with my happiness and my well-being. And I made a decision at that point that, like, I'm not going to put this figuring out of absolute truth or truth in front of how I enjoy my present moment. It was becoming an obstacle for me in life, just like conspiracy theories and spirituality and stuff. This is when I was in my 20s. And so since then, I brought with me an understanding that truth is just one thing that you could hold as your primary orientation as life. It's not the truth to hold truth, right? It's not like the right thing. It's just a thing. And then we have a culture in the world that suggests that truth is God. We could say that truth is the thing that should be the most important thing. And I think that, so I hold truth, and it has value, but it's not the most important thing, especially in every moment. There might be moments where I am concerned with truth, but most of the time I choose that what does this create for me is so much more important than what is or isn't so, as you would say, or what's true. I also don't particularly know that I can know what's true. And so to have that as the most important thing in a moment, to the sacrifice of what my seeing or this experience, this evaluation creates, to me seems silly. I'm living in this experienced moment. And so I'm more interested in, personally, what does this create than I am what's true.
Right. There's an old Chinese proverb, which I was introduced to many years ago. It said, you can either be happy or you can be right.
It's very similar, yeah.
Right. And what I used to think this meant is, I thought it was about interpersonal conflict. You can either like argue the toss about something, or you can just let it go and then be happy. But I think it's much deeper than that. I think if you look at these two things, happiness is about state. It's about being.
It's about now.
Right. And, you know, it's about phenomenology and experience, whereas rightness is about facts and truth and correctness and all of these sorts of things. And I think what it's actually saying is you can either prioritize your beingness or you can prioritize your rightness, right? The choice is yours, beingness or rightness. And I think that that is not an insignificant choice. And I think the thing that you and I both advocate strongly is prioritizing your beingness, you know, exploring with that, creating with that, noticing the effect that that has. To me, that's what craft is all about. Science is all about rightness.
I am creation, creating, and being is primary.
Right, there you go, right?
There it is.
You can be happy, you're right. So there it is. It was there on John's.
Just on my mug.
Yeah,
my
we
new
could have
mug.
just set that up in front of the camera and said nothing for the last hour or so.
I know. It wouldn't be as fun. Let's do some more questions.
Yeah, okay.
Guys, we said 90 minutes. It's been 90. If you want to hang up, you can. We'll send you a recording, but I think we'll just keep talking until we burn out.
We'll do a little bit more.
Okay. Paul's question, does language represent or create reality or both simultaneously?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Definitely. There's a little point that I want to make here about
language. We can't help but fleshing it out, though.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the things for me is I'm interested in how things are conceptually rendered. This is a term that I use a lot. Concepts are key. Concepts are key. because it's through concepts that we turn random raw data, it's how we organize data through concepts. And that's how we shape our experience. So our reality tunnels are fundamentally conceptually structured. Now, here's the thing. Concept and language are not the same thing. Word and language are not the same thing, but they have a relationship. And a relationship is kind of one of an iceberg with, so if you see an iceberg, I'm not going to draw it. We know the iceberg diagram. There's a little bit above the surface. That's the word. And then there's this whole bit underneath, and that's the concept. So they're not the same thing. All words are attached to concepts. All words are attached to concepts.
That's why when you look it up in the dictionary, there's like 7 definitions, and they have all sorts of stuff about it, right?
Right. But here's the thing. Not all concepts are attached to words. So you get some concepts that don't have words on them. How words work is handles on concepts. Now, language becomes powerful because when you use a word, if somebody makes sense through that word, they're actually making sense through the concept it's attached to. So language becomes the interface between words and concepts. And I think this is why if you look at kind of magical tradition, you've got grimoires, which are grammars, talk about spelling and spells, and a lot of it's bound up in the language, but really it's a gateway through to deeper, richer concepts.
Like love is a word that points to a concept that it doesn't accurately describe, right?
Yeah.
That's why people get lost in the word love. It's like, no, that's not what love is. And it's like, there's this debate about it because it's almost like the whatever love is pointing to is beneath the surface.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe a close word to it, but different people have different words into this like thing beneath this like big block of ice beneath the surface that we can't see.
And in a shared culture, each individual will hold a slightly different rendering of that concept, but it's culturally informed as well. And there's enough overlap that we can kind of mostly communicate most of the time, at least in some kind of rough way.
Which, say more of that in reference to Craig Hemling's question, is it ever possible for 2 people to truly share the same reality tunnel?
Right.
As powerful as words can be, are they powerful enough to truly and fully share a personal experience with someone?
They're just not. Because you know, my concept of love is pre-linguistic, is sub-linguistic, and it's rich. Okay, it doesn't exist as a word in my body. It exists in a whole network of connections. John's idea for love isn't mine.
Right.
Mine's in my body, his is in his, or my body in its environment, or whatever it's in, right? Let's just assume for a second.
Yeah,
it's just hanging out there in the body, right? So somebody says love, and it's like, you plug the handle in, you plug it in.
We both get different.
Yeah, so somebody could say, John, James, all you need is love, right?
Yeah.
Now, we've probably got enough overlap to be able to go, yeah, we can find...
To have some agreement.
To have some agreement, to have some resonance, all of that. But it's not going to mean I experience that the way John does. Or,
no, and this is where so much human conflict comes in, because people are arguing about concepts because they both are arguing about words because they both conceptualize them differently.
Right.
They have a different... They're making different meaning of it on the inside.
So we met a guy at the weekend who was absolutely adamant that all concepts were held equally by people. That seemed to be what he was saying.
Yeah.
So there was no ambiguity in words. A word meant what it meant, and that was it. And it's like, well, I think this conversation's over because there's nothing more to say. You know, so some people do believe that, and I think this is the height of illusion. I think this guy we met the weekend could have done with doing a lot of Black Path stuff. And there's the irony in it, because that's what he's spent his life thinking he's doing.
But I want to say something to Craig as well, because he follows up that question about truly sharing a personal experience with the same reality tunnel, which we're saying no. Yeah. But then he follows it up with saying, or will there always be a disconnect? For me, our reality tunnels matching are not required for us to be connected.
Yes.
Here's my reason, is because all connection with anybody is experienced in me, which means it's experienced through my reality tunnel of that relationship. So I'm only in relationship with myself, in the sense that like there's who I think I am and there's who I think James is, but my idea of who James is, which is the thing that I'm actually connected to, is held inside my idea of me, and my idea is inside my reality.
Right.
And so my experience of connection with James is actually all contained within my own reality.
Right.
And so we can have different reality tunnels, and we can have total connection if both of us are fully connected with the ideas of each other.
Yeah, yeah. And on another level, you could make pseudoscientific arguments that we're connected anyway because the boundary between me and the space around isn't, you know, and there's many arguments you can make to create connection. But here's the thing I would say, because I've had this before. When I've worked with people to help them start seeing what I think is a neat way of calling it the principle of separate realities. We all occupy our own rendering of reality. Mm-hmm. Some people, when I'm bringing them to that point, occasionally have someone that starts to freak out and say, but that's terrible. That means that we can't really understand each other. And my soulmate, like who I believe I have a deep connection with, if we're in separate realities, and they start having a meltdown about that.
Yeah.
You know, but it's patently not the case. And anyone who has a cat or a dog that they love, and they sit and they stroke their dog or they stroke a cat, and they experience peace and oneness and just being totally with their pet.
Yes.
Obviously, this is a completely different species, but there's no barrier to connection.
This morning I was talking with Noam, who's visiting, a friend of mine, who I did a creators dialogue with recently, and he was talking about how he had a guest recently, and he has a couple cats, and he was saying to his guest who has kids, it's like having a kid, and she said, oh, it's not like having a kid. A cat can't be like having a kid. But then later she said, well, do you always talk to your cats like that? And you talk to them like they're a kid. Mm. And so I was like, to say that your relationship to your cat is different than my relationship to a kid is, I mean, you can't actually say that, because the relationship you have to your kid is contained within you, and the person's relationship to the cat is contained within them. And there's probably plenty of people who relate to their cats as if it were a kid in the common way. And so therefore their relationship to their cat is a relationship to a kid. And there's also probably people, maybe unfortunately, that relate to their kids as if they're pets in the average way. Yeah. And so it's like, you know, every relationship is a relation to another person or being or a stone or a plant is actually a relationship that's completely contained within their own experience.
Right. And this is an interesting point when it comes to relationships, because when you see this, you start to see the role of your own meaning making, and you understand the principle of separate realities. It empowers you in relationships to create even more connection and even more functionality and generativity and awesomeness and coolness. Once you start, instead of thinking, oh, you know, can we really connect with each other? Do we really understand each other? Is this really my soulmate? Which is again about is or isn't so land. Yeah. Instead of going, so what is it that we want to create together in terms of a relationship? You know, and I think that when you get that, far from being a disconnecting thing, it opens up so much potential for deeper and richer connection.
My ideal situation is that my wife and I both adopt the reality tunnel, the illusion that we are deeply and intimately connected. If we both live in the illusion, our own version of the illusion that we are deeply and intimately connected, then we are deeply and intimately connected. Yeah. It's not more true because something's happening out there. It's just more coherent. We're both having similar experiences.
Right. And I want to say something here, by the way. Some people watching this might think, oh, so James, you're advocating just living in illusions and presupposing that illusions are separate from reality. Okay. I think you can look at illusions as separate from reality, and that can be a useful thing to do, but recognizing that they're fully connected as well. In that, your illusions shape your engagement with reality, which actually has a transformative effect.
Well, they render reality.
They render it. They render reality in an experiential way. Like, this is the difference between like chronological time and psychological time, which we won't get into here. But they render, you know, you render your phenomenological experience of it, which actually has an impact on how things actually are. There is a, you know, everything is connected. There isn't really a disconnect. So even if we're talking about, you know, we're leveraging a disconnect to actually create a deeper connection in some ways. So yeah, it's like a both and thing again.
So let's speak, I have something to say for Michelangelo Key. Can you address, Michelangelo Key? Can you address the question of belief, its role, if any, its existence, if any? So what I'm reading in that is, does belief really exist? And if so, what's its role? to me, it's very simple and straightforward. Belief is a word that comes from, in German, is Glauben, which comes from Lieben, which is to love. So for me, belief is simply to love, to have faith in, to give love to an idea or a concept. And so in that sense, yes, it exists. It's something that it's experienced. If I love something, I can fall in love with something, which is to believe in the idea that I'm connected to it or that it's meaningful to me. And so for me, its role is central. To fall in love with concepts is to shape a reality for myself that augments, as we're saying this over and over again today, that augments and renders my experience of the world. So for me, beliefs are very real, and their role is primary in my life. It's the primary act of magic, is to become aware of, to destroy, and to create beliefs.
Yes.
Yes.
Agree. And I will say, my friend Lionel Snell, aka Ramsey Jukes, he has a very simple view of magic. He is a very, I love Lionel's thinking, because he's a guy that can think about something as crazy as magic without having to leave his critical faculty at the door. So I really appreciate that. He's pointed out that really giving the gift of belief is the engine of magic, the ability to give the gift of belief. And I love this concept of the gift of belief, the way it transforms a relationship with belief. Most people go, well, I just don't believe that, or, well, I believe that, but they've got no choice about it. They are the victim of their beliefs. But I love this idea, this rendering the gift of belief. This is something I can give. I can put into something. I don't have to argue about whether it's true. I can give it the gift of belief.
To love something, like in the sense of love being a verb. I mean, it's when you see that the root of belief is to love, then as an action. I mean, that's just the idea that it's a gift becomes obvious.
Right. And I think giving it the gift, giving anything the gift of belief is breathing life into it, as I wrote down on or bringing life into it, breathing life into it. I like that metaphor. That's an act. This, to me, you know, I've used the term reality shaper and reality shaping across the years. This is the essence of this craft. It's being able to bring different renderings of reality to life, giving the gift of belief. The skill, the craft of doing that is a key aspect of this. And it's a thing that is transformative for you. It will change your life. Developing this craft will utterly transform your life in every way, and transform your capacity to transform your life as well. Become self-transforming.
Yeah, it is. My coach and mentor says, the more you can see, the more you can see. It's exponential. As you increase your capacity to see your realities and change them and create them, your capacity to see your realities and change them and create them increases.
Right, which actually, going back to Kevin's question, that is speaking to the more analog nature of transformation. Right.
It's, you know, yes, it is incremental, but it's also exponential.
Yes.
In that sense. For that reason, because it's cumulative.
Yeah.
Tyrone asks, James, you talk about the innate intelligence of the organism. And John, is this what you refer to as spirit? And what practices do you engage in to better access this greater intelligence or spirit? So I think we did agree before the call that we are talking about the same thing, but you had some points about how you relate to it.
Things, actually, I know why Ty is mentioning is the intelligence of the organism. I don't think of that. That's kind of, in a sense, not really part of my own reality tunnel. It's something I evoke for clients when I'm doing change work. So I don't tend to think about it that way myself. I tend to think about it in a way more complex way, right? In a more nuanced and more detailed way. That if I presented it to a client that way, they'd go, huh? What? So instead, I simplify it. So when I'm speaking to a client, I will often speak about the deep intelligence within them. I'll say, you know, the deep intelligence within you is present now and is already making changes. So it's a simplification of a lot more complex reality that I would hold for myself. So I will say that.
So I'll say what my relationship, when I use the word spirit, what I mean by that, To me, I see the universe as unfolding. I say sometimes that you are the Big Bang still banging on. And what I mean by that is like, I think of like reality and life as I see the planets being formed. I see molecules bumping into each other. I see rivers flowing and soil and wind and everything geological banging into each other and unfolding and creating. And then I see life and I see organisms and I see pollen cross-pollinating and I see animals having intercourse and insects and fluids moving and then merging. And then on a genetic level, there is this creation of more life and more life unfolds. So essentially genes are moving and unfolding and twisting together and creating more and new forms, and the complexity increases. And I see that happening through humans, of course, through intercourse and then babies being born. And I also see on another plane there being a mimetic unfolding through birth, through language, of this new order of evolution in the universe of intelligence. So the memes being akin to genes and unfolding, and there's information coming out of my Instagram and conversation happening in the other room and the memories of conversations happening in my mind, and all of these memes are flowing. And so while the wind is blowing outside and it's waving the flags that I have hanging in the backyard, and they're Tibetan flags, there's also the meaning that's waving for me and the idea of spirituality. And so all of these layers are not only unfolding simultaneously, but they're interacting with each other. And all of that comes into me. The food I ate this morning, the breeze going across my skin, the thoughts in my mind from the conversation yesterday, the stuff coming through the thread with you guys here, all of that at the same time is spirit. And I could try to catch some of that with my prefrontal lobe, my neocortex, and focus in on it and have a linear relationship to it and try to make some logical decisions about it. Or I could use my entire body and all of my senses, internally and externally, to access all of that and use the parallel processing of my entire nervous system to access that and to inform me, and then to get in touch with that in a way where, and Tyrone also points to here, which we call, in Eugene Gendlin's words, a felt sense. I would say my intuition is connecting with spirit. That's just what I mean. I just mean that the spirit is everything unfolding through me. It's not supernatural. It's totally natural. Everything, God is everything, not some thing that's external. And so for me, when I say when I'm being called by spirit, it means I'm being called by the flags, the genes, the memes, all of it, all the same, everything at the same time is moving through me, and I'm connecting with that. And one of the ways that I like to connect with it is to use my entire body. And so embodied spiritual work is something that I've spent a lot of time with, but really all that really means is getting more in touch with all of my sensory experience and letting all of my feeling and my thinking and everything inform me. And one of the tools for that James and I have both drawn on, Tyrone asks about here, is the idea of a felt sense from the guy named Eugene Gendlin. And so for me, that was just one of many tools where it helped me to, again, be still, slow down and be present with what am I feeling? Not just what are my emotions right now or what does my hand feel like, but beneath that on a more and more subtle level. And the more time that I spend still or in nature, the more I get in touch with the more subtle movements in my body, the more subtle sensations. And it's not because I'm looking for the truth. I'm just looking to widen the bandwidth of my sensory experience so that I can capture more of what's unfolding through me in this geological, biological, mimetic universe that's unfolding.
So it's nothing to do with your pineal gland.
Maybe a little bit. I try not to drink fluoride.
No, I love that. I love that hugely evocative description. And it just, this is why I'm like, you know, I was reading a guy who was talking about your pineal gland the other day, and that just seems so reductionist compared to John's evocation. Because he's invoking the science myth, and it gets buy-in. So I think there's value in that too. Yeah, but I'm just not there. I'm not looking for the truth. No, I know. It just kind of struck me there at that point. Yeah. The thing that comes up for me a lot in John's description there, which is a key phrase for me, is the idea of the unfolding. And I'll do my thing, my possibly over-acknowledgement thing. So there's this idea from David Bohm. Yeah. And again, I'm not a scholar, so I'm not a David Bohm scholar, but there's a line from David Bohm, participating in the unfolding. To me, that's a beautiful thing. And I think if you're participating, you're recognizing everything is interconnected, everything is inter-influencing everything else. In a sense, there is only one thing happening. you know, or there's many things happening, but they're all, nothing is existing in isolation. So outward influence, inward influence.
And David Bohm says that there's an implicate order.
He does, yeah.
Things, which is, you know, that's actually what's unfolding. It unfolds in chaos, but there's an implicate order in it. And I that speaks to me. It's like because order emerges from chaos, there's some sense of certainty that whenever there's chaos, order will follow. And so that acting in a way that might not make linear sense, I can still have a kind of faith in it, because I believe that acting from this unfolding, going with these wild winds, will lead to something sensible and orderly.
Right. And I think this is an important thing as well in terms of the embodied and the felt sense and this kind of thing. Because if you look at Gendon's original work, he's often checking in and what could this be about? And that's a very useful thing. For me, my use of felt sense has evolved. It's become part of how I engage every day. Often I'm sensing in resistances. This is one place that I'm using felt sense a lot. Where am I resisting something rather than flowing with it? Because if I want to participate in the unfolding and I'm resisting something out of fear, what I'm starting to try and do is micromanage that which I cannot micromanage, because I can tell you the unfolding is bigger than me, so I'm not going to get to micromanage it. So I'm often using my felt sense more to inform me about physical and psychological movement. You know, how I might want to roll with something, how I might want to connect with something, how I might want to create with something. Because for me, movement is important. Not an unhurried, not a hurried movement. It's like a connection with the moment, but the moment is always moving. So I'm not trying to like outpace the movement of the moment. I'm not trying to resist the movement of the moment.
Nice.
You know, it's always moving. And for me, the felt sense bit is informing me as to how much I'm going with that and creating with that versus resisting it, perhaps out of fear or panic or some story I've got about how it should or shouldn't be.
I think it's important to remind everybody too, when you're saying what's happening in the moment, you mean inside you and outside, as all of it.
The totality, all that stuff you were talking about, the totality of everything is what's happening, what's unfolding in the moment. Because, you know, there's two sides to my craft. One of them is how we use our reality tunnels as personal technology. The other side of it is what I call non-linear generative engagement, how you dance with the unfolding, with the infinite complexity of life, all the unknown unknowns that you have no chance of predicting or controlling. How do you dance elegantly with that to create the results that you want? So for me, the felt sense stuff, a lot of it is about informing me about my engagement in the moment, and not just simply about sort of uncovering the way some people use it as a sort of a richer intuition about uncovering some hidden knowledge from the world. But that's just my frame. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's a major frame for me.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
I don't know. I was reading the questions.
I thought you were. Yeah, I could sense that.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm just thinking, man, it's been 2 hours. We've got all these questions, and I don't think we should try to get to them all in here, but we've got them in the text chat. So what I think we should do is bring them into a comment thread when we post a replay. Okay. And we can speak to them. Yeah. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think that's a good idea because otherwise
my brain is starting to feel dense.
I haven't even eaten anything today. This is crazy.
Yeah, let's go get breakfast.
All right. So thank you all for participating in this.
In this unfolding.
In this unfolding. Yes. Everyone who's actually here on the Zoom call, all the people that are following the Facebook Live.
Yeah, let's talk about if you guys want to see more of our work, where you can do that. You've got a webinar series coming up.
Yeah, I've got a webinar series coming up. I'm going to mention this now. I haven't got anything to sell because there's no links, there's no page, there's no nothing. I'm doing a full webinar series in October, which is called A Reality Shaper, Deep Craft. And the subtitle of that is Using Reality Tunnels as Personal Technology. So this conversation has been much more in the theoretical, in the abstract place. What I want to do with that is I want to get people to get the craft, to increase their maneuverability, to be able to start using this stuff for real as actual technology, start making differences in their lives. Yeah. Because for me, this is my craft. This is what I do to create and shape in my own life. If somebody were to ask me, well, James, how good are you at it? My answer would be considerably better than I was, but not as good as I'm going to be. So for me, I'm a kind of work in progress with this craft myself. But I do have a lot of distinctions and hacks and bits of business that are coalescing into a system that after many years I'm feeling ready to start sharing. So in October I'm going to start sharing that.
Cool.
And then there's my other stuff, jamestripp.co.uk, and you can find me. I'm on social media.
We're findable.
I'm findable.
So for me, for anybody who's interested in learning more about my work, is I've been coaching and creating and helping people in one-to-one dialogue for 10 years. And 6 months ago, I started teaching my relationship to this work and how I create myself and how I've used that to create everything in my life. A beautiful life with my wife and my son, and living where I want to live and making all the money I wanted to make. And so I have a monthly membership subscription thing. It's $100 a month. It's called the Creating Community. It's a pretty small group right now. It's about 65 people, but I'm doing monthly classes in there, and I'm basically teaching really the core principles that I use to create myself and create my world. And I do that with a little bit of sharing up front, 20 minutes of theory or concept. And then I spend the rest of the class in dialogue with people, actually helping them to bring the concepts to life in their own world. And so if any interest in that, you can find the link and read about it. And if you have questions, let me know. And if you want to join us, go for it.
Yeah, and if you're here because you know me and you like my take on things, you found things I've shared with you useful, I want to give John a full endorsement. I want to give John's stuff, his approach, a full endorsement. There's a lot of people out there offering various things. John is completely 100% real deal. I've known John for 10 years. He has utterly transformed his life. Can I tell them something about
Sure,
that?
tell him something.
When I first met John, he was broke and selling everything to pay his rent, right? And now he has created a wonderful life in sunny Santa Monica, you know, completely shaped the life that he wants to shape. I've watched him do this, and he does it with an incredible degree of efficiency. So I fully endorse John.
I'll fully endorse James as well. I mean, obviously we're good friends and we're going to say nice things about each other, but one of the reasons we're good friends is because I think we both have a high bar for who we're going to spend our time with. And I have a way of relating to myself and changing myself that, for me, I have a high bar around that. And James is somebody that I look up to as a self-changer. And I learn from him constantly about how to take ideas and how to shift myself. And I watch him in real time grow himself. I think I wrote about this on Facebook. Like, your willingness to question everything means that at any moment, no matter what you're experiencing, you will question it and you create with it. And I've seen James go from working in a government job where it was like a prison to literally you're traveling the world. You've taken your kids out of the education system, given them they're like ingenious, brilliant, and doing so many cool things. And like, you basically live wherever you want to live, and you don't work that much. I mean, sometimes I'm a little envious. I was saying to Captain, I would just love to have James's life. I'm like a couple calls a week and just creating. And so anyway, you know, we can pat each other on the back all day long, but if you're here following my work up till now and you're curious about James, I think this webinar series could be a great way to learn from just another person that has similar and different ideas. So
yeah, that would be cool.
Recommend it.
And by the way, if you are interested in getting on the webinar thing, because I don't have anything up, like any portal or anything as yet, but if you do private message me, that will be a useful thing.
Cool.
Facebook, something like that. Email.
All right. Thank you all. We're done. Yeah. Thank you guys for being here. We'll get back to the questions following this.